backstage. Welcome, Ira. You'll have to unmute.
There we go.
There we go. Good morning.
Morning.
And we're in the webinar. So welcome to NSMA 37th Annual Conference. Ira Keltz, Deputy Chief of the Office of Engineering Technology. And we're pleased to have you as always. Just for folks who don't know, Ira presented for us last year as well. We usually get an annual update from the FCC. Ira is responsible for developing national spectrum policies for the United States telecom industry. This includes allocating spectrum for licensed services, setting technical rules for unlicensed devices, and implementing procedures for equipment certification. So we're pleased as always to see Ira Keltz alive and well and broadcasting from somewhere in the National Capital Region. Hey, Ira.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks.
I'm all right, brother.
So, all right. Well, thank you for having me back again this year. It's a shame can't do this live, but let's hope for next year.
We're definitely aiming for next year, live and in person with donuts and coffee and everything.
Well, then I will be there.
Oh, awesome.
All right. Well, thanks. Good morning to everybody who's out there. Let me get started. Let me share my screen. Let me see. Whoops. Why is that? There we go. Is that my screen up now?
Your screen is up. You're on slide one.
Excellent, because I can't tell. So thanks again, and once again, I'm going to use some time here to try to run everybody through some of what's been going on at the FCC over the last year or so since the last time I spoke to you here. So with that, let me jump right in, and I think everybody's pretty much aware the focus over the last year has been on 5G. Specifically the midband spectrum. We've heard over and over, that we're in the big spectrum race, and midband is someplace the U.S. had been lacking somewhat, and we've been going like gangbusters to try to rectify that the best we could. The chairwoman, said just recently at Mobile World Congress. Midband spectrum, is ideal for capacity coverage. I don't think I'm telling anybody here anything you don't already know, but it just does kind of, hammer in the focus that the commission has on trying to make more spectrum available and keep that spectrum pipeline full. So with that, we've had a whole number of proceedings over the last year or so that have touched on the midband spectrum, specifically 3 gigahertz. So let me start 3450 to 3550 megahertz or 3.45 gigahertz. We've recently completed a very successful auction here. We've recently just issued all the licenses, over 4,000 licenses. This spectrum band, as I'm sure I've told you guys before, but it's somewhat unique in the way we approach sharing, in that we were able to provide the entire band for full unfettered use by the commercial industry, except for a number of zones where coordination is needed with the with DoD and the federal agencies using that spectrum. It's a very different approach from anything we've really done before, and I think it does provide quite a bit of spectrum access. I know, given that we've just issued the licenses, a lot of licensees I think are just raring to go and to start building this out and getting service out here. So the other thing we've done here, and throughout the entire 3 gigahertz band, is we've had secondary users in that band. We've had both amateur users, and we have weather radars, non-federal secondary weather radars. And in order to prepare this spectrum, as well as the band below it that I'll talk about in a minute, we have cleared those out. Now that we've issued the licenses just about a week or so ago, that starts the clock. I think it's a 180-day clock for the for those users to vacate the band and provide a clear and free access for our licensees. The other thing that is happening here is that there is a clearinghouse that's being set up to deal with the cost reimbursement for the radio location, the weather radars. This is something a little different than we've ever done before. Not the clearinghouse, but the fact that the commission made a decision to reimburse secondary users to vacate the spectrum. In the past, we've only really done that for primary users. So the clearinghouse, there was a public notice a while back seeking comment on the stakeholders. I believe we'll see pretty soon a public notice that designates who will be on that search committee and get that process going to keep this band moving to get it into service. Moving slightly up in the spectrum, the C band, or 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz band. I think obviously this has been in the news quite a bit since since late last year, early this year. Again, a very successful auction. I think $81 billion or so for the licenses here. We cleared 280 megahertz of previous satellite downlink spectrum. So currently we are in phase 1, meaning only the bottom 100 megahertz is in use, and only in 46 PEAs at the moment. We only have 2 licensees in that lower 100 megahertz, Verizon and AT&T. Phase 2, which is slated to begin in late 2023, I believe then the number of licensees goes up to, it's somewhere in the around 19, 20, 21. I don't know the exact number. So, so the licensees are building out. And obviously the big issue here that has been all over the news is the issue with radar radio altimeters for aircraft and the potential interference. So just a couple words on that. We are continuing to work with our licensees and work with the FAA as well as NTIA to resolve any of the issues that are ongoing here. There's a whole host of activities that are happening both here and globally, in order to better understand the issue. Frankly, I still think the commission got it right. I don't personally think there's going to be any real interference issues here, but I also understand the aviation industry trying to take a very cautious approach. All real world testing to date, none of that testing. Finland has done testing, France has done testing, a number of other countries. There's an ongoing testing in Canada. There's testing happening in the US on the JFRAE program, the Joint Interagency 5G Radio Altimeter Interference Group that's being run through by DOD and ITS from out of Boulder, part of NTIA, is running a lot of the testing. They've done a whole host of measurements and bench testing to date. Gathering those results. And the FAA, is working with Verizon and AT&T at the moment to try and provide as much flexibility to build out. I think, from their standpoint, they'd like to see a little bit more flexibility, but we are continuing to work through that process. Hopefully down the road in the near future, as more of this testing occurs, we will see additional build out. And of course, this becomes even more important as we head towards the end of this year into next year, as the phase 2 licensees come online. So this is something we are very focused on, and basically not a day goes by that we're not working this issue. So let me jump back down below the 3450 band. So there's renewed focus now on the lowest part of the 3 gigahertz band at 3.1 to 3.45. So a lot of this, we had the last year, the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act that was passed, and that provided $50 million to DoD to do research and development to understand what can be done here to provide spectrum for commercial use on a shared basis. So the idea is the spectrum would get reallocated, where right now it's federal only, to federal, non-federal shared use. Spectrum would be auctioned, but it would all be done on some sort of a shared basis. I don't know at this point what that's going to look like, if it's going to be something like CBRS with a SAS, or something closer to 3450 with coordination zones, or something entirely different. I think that remains to be seen. So there is a 21-month timeline for doing all this preliminary work that is currently ongoing. And then the statute stipulates that the commission cannot auction the spectrum until late 2024. So, obviously there's a lot of work that has to go on before that, with identifying what spectrum can be reallocated, the mechanism for sharing, and then the commission would have to conduct a rulemaking, both for service, do the allocation, do the service rules, and any auction rules and procedures. So this is ongoing work, and along with that, okay. I'm sorry, let me jump to here. Since I think I already mentioned stuff on the previous chart. So one of the activities that is happening here is what's called the PATHS group, or Partnering to Advance Trusted and Holistic Spectrum Solutions. This is, again, a slightly different approach than we've taken in the past. This is a group that was convened by DoD, and it is involving very early in the process, both the stakeholders from Department of Defense, as well as the industry, academics, the FCC is involved, NTIA is involved. So this is trying to bring all the stakeholders together in a setting to work through all of those various issues I talked about regarding allocations and sharing mechanisms and so on and so forth, in order to try to come up with some agreements early on in the process, get everybody on the same page, and in some hopefully quite a bit of agreement, consensus for how best to move forward, which will, the idea is to make the rulemaking process that much more smoother, and hopefully quicker, and get this spectrum out into the marketplace faster. So I think what the big takeaway from here is, through the last several proceedings with CBRS, with the 3450 band, I think we've learned quite a bit, and our process continues to evolve. And I think this is a good example of trying to keep improving our process, involve stakeholders as early as possible, and see how many issues we can work out prior to a rulemaking, in order to try to try to make the process, I'll repeat myself, smooth and simple and easy. So that's a pretty good overview of the three 3 gigahertz band. Well, for the most part, because hold on, let me jump to here and then I'll go back. So the other part of 3 gigahertz, I think, as everybody's aware, is the CBRS. This has been seems to be very successful. We've had dynamic sharing since a couple of years now. The SASs are working as designed. I am not aware of any issues that have occurred, and people seem to be using the service, and from the reviews I've read, are generally going very well. It's as designed. Seem to be protecting the incumbent users, both the Earth stations, the Navy radars, and PALs are the protected area licenses. The PALs are providing service, and there's plenty of GAA, or general authorized access, use going on. The other interesting thing I always find with CBRS is, given the ability to do GAA and target areas, is the new use cases that are coming online. I think this is a really great laboratory for looking at things like private networks, currently LTE, probably moving towards private 5G type networks, a lot of IoT type usage, and so on and so forth. So I think this band is going to keep evolving and is going to continue to be very successful. We can use hopefully a lot of what we learn here potentially to apply to other bands in the future. So with that, between the 3450 all the way to 3980, that's hundreds of megahertz that the commission has made available for commercial use, geared towards 5G use, in a fairly short time frame. And hopefully we can add more to that from the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz band, and have quite a bit of spectrum out there for commercial use. So I think that pretty much covers the entire 3 gigahertz band. Jumping back a little bit lower, the next significant auction that the commission will be conducting will be this this August in the 2.5 gigahertz band. I think this has been on the forefront for quite a while. A lot of folks have been waiting for this auction in order to fill up the band. We're going to auction off any of the white spaces that are not currently licensed, and try to get a little bit more structure out of this band and increased usage. We've done a lot of rulemaking here, provided usage for expanded use to tribal communities in rural areas, and obviously it has been used for mobile broadband for quite a while through the existing service that's there, and hopefully that will expand after the auction to fill out the band a little bit more. So jumping a little bit higher, again, this is not a whole lot of update from when I spoke to you last year. The 12.2 to 12.7 gigahertz band, where we've got quite a bit of interest from some folks to try to provide mobile two-way broadband. As I think everybody knows, this band's already being used for direct broadcast satellite, as well as the MVDDS service. It's also, there's interest from the NGSO satellites for usage here. So it's a very, very complicated sharing scenarios that need to be worked through. The commission does have an open rulemaking where we sought comment on a whole host of options for potential sharing. There's a lot of technical information as well as other information in the record the commission is going through in order to kind of still work its way through what, if anything, can be done here to provide more access. So keep an eye on here. There's there's quite a bit of interest from a number of parties. So and we'll see where this goes. But I know from my own experience working on MVDDS, which was extremely complicated just to allow that. Providing mobile, while nothing is impossible, it's certainly difficult. But the commission is continuing to work through any of those issues to, and whatever is possible, we will do our best to expand usage of the spectrum the best we can. So high band spectrum, I have this chart up. I don't think this is any different than probably what I showed you last year. And I have this here just to, as a kind of a reminder that all these bands have been in play for quite a while also, and they continue to get built out. I think we're seeing more usage here from the licensees, even with the new focus on building out the mid band. I don't think any of our licensees have lost focus on the high band and some of the tremendous capacity that's up here. I think we're seeing a lot of fixed wireless access type of applications. I think that'll keep growing. Also, fill in to large venues, arenas, sports events, conventions, and so forth. And obviously, there's still a few bands that are hanging out there the commission has not acted on yet, and some open rulemakings that we'll see where those go down the road. Keep moving up in the spectrum. We still have open rulemaking at 70 and 80 gigahertz bands. These have been used for some backhaul and fixed point-to-point links. Since it's been about 2 years now, we've had an open rulemaking looking at changing the antenna standards in order to facilitate backhaul, especially for 5G services, and to make use of all the capacity up here. There's also been some more recent filings with folks asking for other types of usage here. One is to use high altitude platforms in order to provide service to rural areas or in disasters, emergencies, or other uses. So that was put out for public comment back in October. And there's also some was it Aeronet had asked for usage to provide point-to-point links to maritime and aviation platforms. So again, the commission continues to work through these issues, and again, there's hopefully we'll see some action in the somewhat near future, but a lot of difficult issues to work through. Moving to the unlicensed realm, 6 gigahertz, and I know there's, I guess, a panel on this later today. So quite a bit has been happening at 6 gigahertz as the commission opened the rules to expand unlicensed access in the band. Since late last year, we've had low power indoor usage. Those devices have been out there in the market, have been sold in use. Everything I hear, getting good reviews for the amount of capacity that they're able to provide, and the focus on Wi-Fi 6 and specifically 6E in this band. So there's quite a bit of activity still going on in this band. So we've done the one rulemaking where we did provide the rules for the low power indoor and for standard power outdoor use, which is subject to use of an AFC, an automated frequency coordination system or database. So the big thing the commission is focused on at the moment is authorizing those AFC systems. We had solicited interest in administrators for those. We had gotten a number of parties interested. Currently, there are 13 proposals. The commission is working diligently to provide sometime in the near future conditional approval of those AFC administrators so that their development can continue and then get on with the testing phase. The testing phase is something we're still working out exactly what that's going to look like. The commission in the report and order said we would do some lab testing and then some public testing. I think lab testing is fairly straightforward. I think everybody knows what that should kind of look like. The public testing, we're still trying to figure out the most efficient and best way to do that in order to try to provide access as efficiently and quickly as possible. There's been a lot of work from outside parties, specifically the Wind Forum and the Wi-Fi Alliance have been doing a lot of work on various standards for the devices and the testing, and developing some standards and protocols for how testing can be done, especially in an efficient manner. Some criteria that the testers should have, and so on and so forth. So we're looking at that, and the idea, as I said, is hopefully in the very near future we can provide the conditional access, conditional approval, and we'll provide as we can more and more information on how the testing is going to work, so that we can keep moving forward on this band. There's a whole host of other activities that are ongoing with this band also. We had a recent court case where the court affirmed our decision in what we did here, which was good. It did remand one specific issue that NAB had raised regarding how much their experience in the 2.4 gigahertz band, where they state some of their BAS operations, broadcast auxiliary service operations, was interfered from Wi-Fi, and that should have been taken into account when we did some of the our 6 gigahertz rulemaking. So there's a public notice we had put out seeking comment on that remand issue. And once the commission gets a chance to analyze all the comments, we will hopefully get something out relatively soon to deal with that remand issue. We also have a further notice of proposed rulemaking that's outstanding that we need to work through a number of issues. I think the most significant one here is the unlicensed industry's desire to have very low power devices being able to be used without a database anywhere at any time. So there's a lot of technical issues that need to be worked through. We continue to go through the record, work with the industry, and we will keep working that issue to see what we can do and what kind of time frame. The other issues, there were some folks that asked for additional power for the low power indoor usage. They asked for standard power mobile devices that would be subject to the AFC use, where we currently have prohibited use on mobile platforms in order to protect the incumbent fixed service from interference. And also being able to account for using higher power with directional antennas subject to the using the AFC database. So those issues the commission still has to work through. We also had a public notice seeking comment on doing direct client-to-client communications. So that's another issue that the commission's looking at. And the other piece of this, obviously, is we need to update the ULS. We said we would do that to account for temporary fixed operations in order to provide the ULS with a more specific location during that temporary time of operation in order for the AFC to specifically take account of that. The other part is the device authorization. Our lab is working through the various issues that go into device certification for the standard power and the interface with the AFC. So there'll be updated KDBs coming out at some point in the future, as well as we may be providing a new API into our equipment authorization system for the AFCs to use. So all of those activities are currently ongoing, and this is a band we have particular focus on to try to get the AFCs out. I think we're working towards the goal of this calendar year. I'm hopeful that we can still make that time frame. I think it might be a bit ambitious, but that's what we're focused on in order to get the service out there. Moving slightly down in the spectrum, 5.9 gigahertz, another band that we had expanded unlicensed use into. Currently indoor use is permitted in the lowest 45 megahertz. And the big milestone date that's upcoming is July 5th of this year is the date by which all DSRC operations need to vacate the lowest 45 megahertz and move their operations to the upper 30 from 5895 to 5925 megahertz. So that is something, again, we're focused on. The commission is working on a whole host of things regarding this band also. So, most prominently, we do have an outstanding notice of proposed rulemaking or further notice that is dealing with the technical rules for the CV2X, cellular vehicle to everything rules for the upper 30 megahertz. And the commission needs to make some decisions there in order to set the deadline for DSRC to transition to CV to X. So that needs to be done, as well as finalize technical rules for CV to X. As that's ongoing, there are a number of entities, a number of states have filed waiver requests with us to move to CV to X earlier. So the commission is working on that. Our wireless bureau put out some guidance quite a while ago on what they would do for evaluating the waiver requests. Also, they put out a public notice that lifted a freeze on licensing that had been in place on the band for new ITS, intelligent transportation systems, to get licensed into the upper 30 megahertz. And I should also mention that this is another one the commission had been taken to court over on our decision to transition the intelligent transportation service out of that lower 45 megahertz. That court case is still pending. We're still awaiting a decision, but I think the commission is pretty confident that the court's going to rule in our favor. So moving on, let me move up in the spectrum a bit. 60 gigahertz. There's been a lot of activity here. A number of years ago, we had, in addition to the existing unlicensed service that we had originally in the 57 to 64, and now expanded. I'm sorry, and then expanded up to 71 megahertz. We had point-to-point and point-to-multipoint type links and service. We authorized by waiver the solely radar. Since then, we've had a whole host of parties come in asking for rules for additional radar type applications. The commission issued a bunch of waivers last year. Most of these are focused on safety type systems in vehicles in order to ensure that you don't leave an infant or a toddler behind in a car, locked in a hot car. So those have been some of the primary applications, but a lot of companies have some other applications in mind. So we do have an open rulemaking here in looking at what we can do to expand the radar usage in this band for all of these applications. And again, as with everything, and nothing's simple, but there are definitely some technical issues that need to be worked out on how to enable some sharing in an efficient way, that doesn't cause interference from the radars to the other providers in the band that are using LTE type systems or WiMAX or 5G or whatever protocol folks are using. A lot of Wi-Fi up here. So those are being worked out. We have ongoing discussions almost weekly with various parties, and I know there's discussions going on within the industry. So hopefully we can get this one figured out pretty soon and get final rules here, so we can see some of these important applications brought out into the marketplace on a more widespread basis. Some of the other activities that are happening, we're working on things regarding space launch. And what's interesting here is this would be a usage of a lot of spectrum that folks are already using for other applications. The good thing is space launches only occur in a handful of locations. They're usually somewhat isolated. So there's generally not a lot of sharing concern or interference concerns from the sharing, although there could be some. So we're focused on that. And this is looking to make our space industry within the US a lot more efficient. Currently, folks have to come to OET for experimental licenses to support their space launch operations. And it's not the most efficient process. So we're trying to put some more regular standardized licensing rules in place in order to speed the process and relieve a lot of administrative burdens and so on and so forth. A lot of the spectrum that has been used has been federal allocations. So, so we're looking at how to enable the sharing and what the licensing mechanisms need to be. So, as you can see on the chart, there's a bunch of bands in play here, all the way, from down from the UHF band at 420 to 430, through 2 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz for a whole host of launch type telemetry, space vehicle, launch vehicle tracking, and even abort termination type signals if something goes wrong. All extremely important, critical type of applications, especially as the space industry continues to expand, quite a bit over the last couple of years, and I think we're going to continue to see that expansion. So this is something we're working through. The other big thing recently, we've had a notice of inquiry on receivers. This was just last month we adopted this. Again, the important thing to remember here is this is a notice of inquiry, there are no proposals. We are just seeking to update the record, seeking new information. The commission has undergone similar reviews in the past. I personally think that this might be a little bit more ripe currently, given some of the issues in the past couple of years that have all stemmed from essentially receiver issues. When you think through all these proceedings and some of the big press type things, as I mentioned earlier, like the altimeters, which comes down to receiver performance of the altimeters and the fact that they don't have a lot of front end filtering. So the commission is really seeking a lot of input on the current state of play of receiver technology, receiver design, what's on a drawing board for the future, how that can fit into a spectrum regulatory environment, and then what options might make sense for moving forward in order to try to provide incentives for better receivers early on in the process before we run into issues similar to some of the ones we've run into. And, again, the commission is not necessarily looking to mandate anything. I think we'd prefer not to if we don't have to, but we are exploring all options. And these include looking at, industry-led voluntary approaches, voluntary standards, industry standards, and so on. Whether the commission should just release kind of policy guidance type of documents on recommendations, best practices, and then as a last resort, whether there should be specific rules and or mandates, for lack of a better word, in order to compel folks to implement certain parameters on receivers in order to enhance coexistence, especially for co-channel adjacent spectrum services, since that seems to be some of the biggest spectrum issues we've been dealing with the last couple of years are dealing with a lot of overload interference from adjacent bands, and most often the reason is lack of front end filtering or sufficient front end filtering in the receivers. So we'll be looking at this. The comment dates were recently set for the end of June and the end of July for reply comments. And I think the commission is really interested to see what comes in the door for us to evaluate and then figure out what makes most sense for moving forward. This is also something our technical advisory committee has been focused on many times, and there's quite a bit of information out there, in order to kind of think through various approaches to this. Let me mention equipment authorization, supply chain integrity. We have an open rulemaking looking at the equipment authorization process, and this has to do with the Secure and Trusted Communication Network Act of 2019. There was an update, the Secure Equipment Act of 2021, that was enacted quite later than that. We put out a notice of proposed rulemaking prior to that, and this has to do with equipment on the covered list. This is a list of manufacturers and/or equipment that has been determined to be a potential threat to national security. that there's concern over. And the latest statute basically directs the commission that we have to update our rules by this November in order to no longer certify any equipment that might be on that covered list. So again, sounds relatively simple in concept, but everything is never simple. There's a lot of complex legal issues as well as issues on how to actually interpret which equipment falls under this, and then how we work within the equipment authorization process with the TCB program and the lab program in order to make this happen, how it works with between certification and or supplier declaration of conformity type devices. But again, we do have a deadline of November, and I expect the commission will put something out quite a bit before November, which would mean, next couple of months, in order to provide some rules regarding the equipment authorization process, in order to shore up the supply chain and integrity of our networks. Let me mention also a lot of other activities that OET has been heavily involved in. The update to broadband mapping. The chairwoman recently said the new maps will be available in this fall. We're working diligently towards that. There's a data filing window that will open for folks to provide their information. We've already provided information on what kind of data sources should be used and how the data elements, what they look like in order for folks to prepare. And then the part that my office has been most heavily involved in gets to the third-party speed test apps as part of the challenge process. The statute allows for folks to be able to do their own measurements and challenge the maps somewhat. We've been through this before. I think we learned quite a bit over the last couple of years as we've done similar. We've had similar issues and similar, similar efforts. So we recently put out a public notice on what the requirements are for those apps and what the review process is going to be. So we have a lot of our staff is gearing up for the review of those apps and the testing. There are also the beta versions, or at least wireframes are supposed to be made available public, so the public can kind of put it through its paces prior to approval. So all in all, what this should lead to down the road this fall is a much better set of broadband maps than the US has had before, which will certainly be a boon for informing policy, both here at the FCC and also for folks at NTIA as we try to expand broadband access, especially to some of the more rural, underserved areas, which has been a focus. Let me end just mention a couple of other activities that are ongoing. Our experimental licensing program has been booming. I think every year we get more and more applications for lots and lots of innovative applications. But one of the newest things that we actually passed the rules probably 5, 6, 7 years ago now, but are finally starting to come to fruition, is the concept of innovation zones in use with our program licenses, which provide more flexibility than the old conventional license. We've seen the zone in Salt Lake City come online, the platform for open wireless. And I know there's some experimentation going on out there with the University of Utah and collaboration from a number of other universities. And my understanding is there's been more and more interest in using that. New York City has their Cosmos platform. I believe they are very close to beginning operations and doing some testing over there. Northeastern University is hosting the Coliseum network emulator. This is the network emulator. It's the largest in the world, developed by DARPA. Had been used in a number of the Spectrum challenges. So I think, this is to make this more widely available to researchers and industry to do a lot of testing, simulations. So I think a lot of interesting things can come out of that. And the newest one is at North Carolina State University called AirPaw, and they're focused on doing some testing with drones and spectrum for drones. So I think some very interesting developments can come out of that. And then let me also mention the National Science Foundation and their Spectrum Innovation Initiative. I think David Morris is on the agenda for tomorrow, so I'm sure you'll hear about this in much more detail. But the idea here is to provide a way for collaboration of, again, industry, academics, the government, to push the industry forward. There's four initiatives within this Spectrum Innovation Initiative. They're the National Radio Dynamic Zone, or the acronym NERDS, which is somewhat apt, I guess, for a bunch of engineers. We have the National Center for Wireless Spectrum Research, the Spectrum, and there's Spectrum research activities. And there's also a focus on education and workforce development, especially trying to work, I think, with universities and try to pinpoint what skill sets are going to be needed in the future and try to get our students more focused on those types of activities early on. So interesting here, the NSF, the FCC, and NTIA signed a memorandum of agreement in order to collaborate on the implementation and development, and essentially for us FCC, NTIA, to provide some advice and help to NSF as they oversee and run this. And most recently, there was a contract awarded to or I don't know if contract, but an award to Notre Dame University to oversee the Spectrum Innovation Center, called Spectrum X. This is, I think, $25 million over 5 years, and this will host a lot of these, a lot of this work. There's actually a kickoff meeting for the oversight board. I believe it's next week that I'll be attending, and hopefully get a better handle on what's happening there. So this is, I think, a very exciting development in another collaborative effort to try to push spectrum management forward, try to get ahead of the game in many respects, in order to feed into the Commission's rulemaking process earlier and with better information, so we can make better decisions, hopefully on an accelerated timeframe. So with that, I'll stop. I mean, there's certainly plenty of other things happening at the Commission, but I'll stop here. Happy to take questions with whatever time's left. And otherwise, thank everybody for listening.
Yeah, great, Ira. That's so much is going on, and you guys are certainly working hard and innovating and being creative. And I think you've got a lot of attention and a lot of eyeballs on what you're doing. So thanks for that. A couple quick comments, and then I think we have time for one question. The broadband mapping, which does seem like for the first time ever, we're going to really see a really intrinsically intertwined map with input from operators and just regular, residential folks, is amazing. One thought we've been discussing internally is that the ULS, spectrum coordinators, we spend a lot of time coordinating links. And so when we look at the ULS, we know where broadband is, we know where backhaul's been forever, or a variety of last mile services. And so we're toying with the concept of maybe, in addition to letting folks, which is great at seeing the speed tests, but maybe also suggesting either informally or formally to the Commission to also implement into the mapping what it looks like from a ULS perspective in terms of broadband connectivity, from 2 gig on up, let's say, with fixed wireless as an example. So that's just a thought. I don't know if you have a quick reaction to that, and then I'll read a question that's separate.
Well, I mean, conceptually, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. I mean, to me,
yeah.
The only advice I can give is to talk to our broadband team. We have a team within the Commission. I can't remember the name of who's heading it, but easy enough to find. But yeah, that'd be the best thing to do. But I mean, conceptually, I think any information is always helpful to feed into the process.
Yeah, and that's great that the portals are starting to open in that sense. And hats off to the commission for being creative and flexible there. There's a question from Joseph Miller. I'll read it to you. It says, Ira, being with OET, is there any increase in commercial providers requesting military bands? I ask because we are implementing commercial augmentation of DoD satellites. We use our commercial infrastructure to provide services to currently overburdened DoD ground stations and backhaul services. Normally, we request them through NTIA via government customers. However, the process sometimes takes quite long. We end up requesting STAs, special temporary authorities, for uplinks and downlinks. Any information on this topic would be greatly appreciated. And he talks about Space Force and other entities. There's a lot more detail there, but we're short on time, so I'll just throw that out to you.
So yeah, I think there's quite a bit of interest in commercial access to federal spectrum. I mean, certainly, as I talked about the focus at 3.1 and 3.45, there's also focus, and there's some look currently at the 7 to 15 gigahertz, 16 gigahertz band. Anyway, up through there, if there's spectrum that can be made available, that's probably a longer term issue with the focus right now at on the lower band. But I think if you kind of look, and I think CTIA put out maybe a year and a half ago, a list of bands the industry is very interested in. So yeah, there's always focus on industry looking to expand into the federal bands. Obviously, there's always pushback from the federal side who feel like they're under siege all the time. But I think with the way we're moving through, if there are bands folks are interested in, let us know specifically. I can't say that we can do anything all that quickly, given where the current focus, if bands fall outside of that. But it's worth getting on the radar screen to see if what might make sense. There's a lot of good ideas come out of the folks in industry based on what their needs are, and that's what we're here to do, is to try to basically work for not for the industry, but work to get make things as efficient as we can and provide as much access as we can. In the space realm and satellite realm, though, does get very complicated very quickly. A lot of different folks involved. Our international bureau, certainly on the satellite system side, and even the wireless bureau when we start talking about some of the sharing. So, but yeah, I do think there's, I don't know if it's an increased focus, but there's certainly always interest in that kind of a sharing.
All right, thank you, Ira. I know we're hitting the top of the hour, and we're greatly appreciative of so much information. We could probably use a standalone OET webinar at some point if you're willing and able, and or your colleagues. And again, we always appreciate OET coming in. There's really, this whole area just keeps to expand somewhat exponentially, and you've got a lot of eyeballs on it and a lot of interest. And I hope OET gets, I don't know what your wish list is, if you're king for a day, if you got more engineers or whatever. I hope you're getting your wish list fulfilled. And if you're allowed to not be shy and tell us what your wish list is, let us know as well. We'd love to know that as well. So.
All right. Well, thanks, Joe. And thank you for having me back again.
Yeah, we it's a pleasure. So, all right. Thank you, Ira. And hope take care.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.